right. So today we're going to dive into something pretty heavy.
Yeah.
It's a world without the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Okay.
The UDHR. You know, that document that basically sets the standard for how every human being should be treated regardless of who they are or where they're from. We're going to kind of explore what happens when that foundation is ripped away.
It's a thought experiment with chilling implications. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, it isn't just some feel-good document. It's the bedrock of modern human rights law.
Right.
And without it, we're not just talking about abstract legal concepts. Yeah. We're talking about real people facing very real consequences.
Okay, so paint a picture for me. What are some historical parallels we can look at to understand what a world without that kind of universal standard might look like?
Think about the Rwandan genocide in the 1990s.
Okay.
The international community was really slow to react, partly because there wasn't a clear, universally accepted framework for intervening to stop the atrocities.
Yeah.
Or consider the Syrian civil war, where the lack of a unified response has led to a protracted conflict with horrific human rights abuses on all sides.
Right.
These are stark examples of what can happen when the world lacks a shared language and legal framework for protecting human dignity.
So it's not just about the absence of a document.
It's not.
It's about the lack of a shared understanding.
Exactly.
A global consensus on what constitutes a violation of basic human rights.
Precisely. The UDHR, as flawed as it may be, provides that shared language, that moral compass for the world.
Yeah.
Without it, navigating international law becomes a minefield, with different countries interpreting rights and responsibilities in vastly different ways.
Right.
It could potentially lead to a world where power dictates everything, and the most vulnerable are left with no protection.
That brings up another point, the power dynamics between nations.
Sure.
How would those relationships change in a world where there's no UDHR to level the playing field?
The potential for conflict and exploitation would skyrocket. Powerful nations could act with impunity, disregarding international norms and using their might to exploit weaker states.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where economic sanctions for human rights abuses are practically non-existent.
Right.
Authoritarian regimes could consolidate their power without fear of international condemnation or intervention.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is.
A world where might makes right and there's no higher authority to appeal to.
And it's not just about interstate conflict.
Right.
It's about the potential for internal repression as well.
Yeah.
Governments could silence dissent, curtail freedoms, and persecute minorities without facing any real repercussions from the international community. Think about it. Even with the UDHR in place, we see these abuses happening all the time.
Right.
Imagine how much worse it could be without any universal standards to hold states accountable.
It's a slippery slope.
Okay.
But let's bring it down to a more personal level. How would the absence of the UDHR impact the everyday lives of individuals?
Imagine a world where speaking your mind could land you in prison, where criticizing the government is considered a crime.
Oh, wow.
Imagine working in dangerous conditions with no legal protections or recourse against exploitation. The UDHR guarantees the right to a fair trial, freedom of expression, protection from slavery and torture.
Yeah.
These are the fundamental freedoms that underpin a just society.
Right.
Without those guarantees, life could become incredibly precarious, especially for those who are already marginalized or vulnerable.
So it's not just about abstract principles.
It's not.
It's about the very real ways in which these rights shape our lives, even if we don't always realize it.
Yeah.
We're talking about the freedom to assemble, to practice your religion, to access education.
Right.
These are all things that could be threatened in a world without the UDHR.
Exactly. The UDHR enshrines the inherent dignity and equality of all human beings.
Right.
It's a powerful statement that transcends borders and cultures. And without it, the world would be a much darker, more unpredictable place.
Okay, so we've established that a world without the UDHR would be pretty bleak.
Yeah.
But is there any room for hope?
I think so.
Would people still strive for a better world,
Yeah.
even without that legal and moral compass?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Throughout history, even in the darkest of times, there have always been those who fight for justice and equality.
Right.
The desire for a better world, for a society where everyone's rights are respected, is deeply ingrained in the human spirit.
So even in the absence of the UDHR, that yearning for human dignity wouldn't just disappear.
Absolutely not. And that's where we'll explore the story of Amina El-Tahir,
Okay.
a young activist who embodies that enduring spirit in our hypothetical world.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about Amina and how she navigates this world without the UDHR.
Amina's story picks up in North Africa,
Right.
a region grappling with the harsh realities of a world without the UDHR.
Yeah.
Imagine factory workers toiling under exploitative conditions, their rights violated with no legal recourse.
Oh, wow.
This is where Amina steps in, organizing workers, documenting abuses, and demanding better treatment. So it sounds like a real David and Goliath situation. What kind of pushback does she face in this environment where those in power are basically unchecked by international norms?
She's immediately branded a threat to national security, labeled a radical, and faces constant surveillance.
Wow.
Remember, in this world, there's no universal condemnation of things like suppressing free speech or cracking down on dissent.
Right.
Governments can act with impunity, making Amina's work incredibly dangerous.
So how does she operate? How does she even begin to build a movement for change when the very act of speaking out is so risky?
Amina understands that change won't come from top-down pronouncements. It has to emerge from the ground up.
Okay.
She starts by building trust, connecting with people on a personal level, listening to their stories and amplifying their voices. It's about tapping into that shared desire for dignity and respect that transcends national borders or legal frameworks.
So, in a way, she's recreating that sense of shared humanity, that foundation of human rights, but on a local level.
Exactly. She's showing people that they're not alone, that their struggles are connected, and that collective action can make a difference.
Right.
But Amina's not just focused on immediate improvements. She has a much bolder vision.
Oh, okay. I'm sensing a but coming. What's the catch?
Amina realizes that without a universal framework, any progress they make will always be fragile, vulnerable to the whims of those in power.
Right.
So she sets her sights on something much more ambitious.
Okay.
Drafting a new charter of human rights, one that can fill the void left by the missing UDHR.
Wow, that's incredibly ambitious, almost audacious. It's like she's trying to rebuild the foundation of global human rights from scratch.
It is a big undertaking.
Where does she even begin with a project of that magnitude?
Well, she recognizes that the UDHR itself wasn't just handed down from on high. It was a result of years of collaboration, debate, and compromise between people from all over the world. So Amina reaches out to a network of like-minded individuals, activists, lawyers, academics, everyday people who believe in a better future.
So it sounds like she's understanding the power of collective wisdom, drawing on diverse perspectives to create something truly universal.
Precisely. Think about the challenges of crafting a document that can speak to the needs and aspirations of people from vastly different cultures and backgrounds.
Right.
It's a monumental task.
So what are some of the key questions that they grapple with? What makes this new charter, this global charter for human dignity, different from the UDHR?
Well, they have to wrestle with the core philosophical questions.
Yeah.
What are the most fundamental human rights?
Yeah.
Are they inherent or granted? How do you balance individual freedoms with the needs of society?
Right.
How do you ensure that the charter is truly universal and not just a reflection of one particular cultural or political ideology?
Those are some heavy philosophical dilemmas.
They are.
But it's exciting to think about the potential for innovation, for creating a charter that's tailored to the challenges of the 21st century.
And that's where the absence of the UDHR, while tragic, creates an unexpected opportunity. They're not bound by the limitations of a document drafted over 70 years ago.
Right.
They can address issues that were barely on the radar back then, things like digital rights, climate change, the ethical implications of artificial intelligence, issues that are shaping the future of humanity.
So it's a chance to not just recreate the past, but to envision a future where human rights are more inclusive, more relevant to the challenges we face today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the content of the charter.
Right.
It's about the process of creating it. The very act of bringing people together from different backgrounds, of having those difficult conversations, of finding common ground. That in itself is a powerful statement of hope and solidarity.
It's like they're weaving a new tapestry of human rights, thread by thread, conversation by conversation. But let's be realistic.
Yeah.
Even with a brilliant charter, how do you make it more than just words on paper? How do you ensure that it actually leads to meaningful change in a world where power so often trumps principle?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's something that Amina and her collaborators are acutely aware of. They know that without the institutions and mechanisms that have evolved around the UDHR, it will be incredibly difficult to enforce these rights, to hold governments and individuals accountable.
So what's their strategy? What are some of the ideas they're exploring to give this charter real teeth?
Well, Amina and her team, They recognize that enforcement is the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
They're exploring innovative approaches, drawing inspiration from grassroots movements and historical precedents.
Okay.
One idea is to establish a network of independent monitors, kind of like citizen watchdogs, who can document abuses and report them to the international community.
So a decentralized system of accountability, leveraging the power of technology and social media to expose human rights violations.
Exactly. They're also looking at ways to create economic incentives for compliance. For example, they could work with ethical corporations to establish fair trade agreements that prioritize human rights, rewarding businesses that adhere to the Charter's principles.
So it's like a positive reinforcement approach, using the power of the marketplace to promote ethical behavior.
Precisely. They're also exploring the potential of international tribunals or courts that can adjudicate human rights disputes even in the absence of a formal treaty. It's about creating alternative mechanisms for justice, for holding perpetrators accountable and offering redress to victims.
So it's not just about drafting a document, it's about building a whole ecosystem around it.
Yeah.
A system of checks and balances that can actually translate those principles into real-world change.
Right. And perhaps most importantly, it's about changing hearts and minds.
Yeah.
It's about educating people about their rights, empowering them to speak out, and fostering a culture of respect for human dignity.
So education becomes a crucial tool in this fight.
Oh, absolutely.
A way to ensure that the values enshrined in the Charter become deeply ingrained in society.
Absolutely. It's about planting the seeds for a more just and equitable future, even in a world where those values aren't enshrined in international law.
Amina's story is a powerful reminder that the fight for human rights is never truly over, that it requires constant vigilance, creativity, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
And it highlights the importance of individual action. Even without a global framework like the UDHR, each of us has a role to play in upholding those values in our own lives, in our communities, and in the wider world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. What are some things you can do right now to make a difference?
Start by educating yourself. Learn about the human rights challenges facing people in different parts of the world. Support organizations that are working to promote those rights. Have conversations with your friends and family about these issues. Use your voice to speak out against injustice wherever you see it.
It's about recognizing that human rights are not just abstract concepts. They're about real people, real lives, and the choices we make each and every day.
And remember, even small actions can have a ripple effect. Amina's story shows that even in the most challenging circumstances, one person's courage and determination can inspire others and spark a movement for change.
This deep dive has been a sobering reminder of the fragility of human rights.
Yeah.
But it's also offered a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in a world without the UDHR, the human spirit's drive for justice and equality can never be truly extinguished.
Well said. It's been a fascinating exploration.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And to our listeners, we leave you with this. What role will you play in shaping a future where human rights are truly universal?